Okay, and so currently you are seeing the lecture slides, don't you?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, okay. It's just not very clear from Zoom which screen it's sharing. I mean, if you are seeing the slides, then that's fine. So today we're going to continue the talk on Vega-Lite. So last week we introduced the Vega-Lite, and we introduced some simpler visualizations like bar chart and scat plot. And we also showed how to include the visualizations in the web page. So that's mostly about single view. And then today we're going to talk more about layered and multiple views. And then finally, the interactions with selections. And so the layered and multiple view is mostly about kind of composing the single view you created together. So either horizontally or vertically. And interactions is mostly about selection. So you can select certain things in one visualization or make selection in one view affecting the other display in different views. So we actually already saw a multiple view example before. So if you remember, so we initially had a stacked bar chart and using the data from the Seattle weather dataset, we made a bar and we did encoding. So in this particular case, we used histogram. So we used the bin and then aggregated the count. And then the main difference is here. So we used a column, which is one of the way actually to create multiple views. So in this particular case, so we created 5 views, each for one of the weather values, and create 5 views. So we're going to have a lot more of these examples. So these are called layered and multiple view compositions. So we're going to explain they looks quite similar. So basically you have multiple views, but there's a small kind of subtle difference between layered and multiple views, which we're going to explain a little bit later. And so first, we're going to just have a quick look of different kind of commands you can use in Vega-Lite to compose different views together. And so the first one is the facet. And so you can make it look something like this. So in this particular, it's called a row. So each individual validation is a row. So that's C1 is the first row, C2 is the second row, and you join them together. And also you can do layer. So the difference in terms of layer is now you have 2 visualizations. They are overlapping each other, or one is put on top of the other. So you have the bar chart and the second one, which is a line chart. And if you're using layer, it will add the line chart on top of the bar chart instead of having 2 views next to each other. Okay, and then we have the other ones, which is they call the concatenate. And in a sense, they're quite similar to this row. But the difference here is you still have 2 single views. This is called V concatenate, that means vertical. So one will be on top of the other. That's what the vertical means. And also the difference is they will still have their own axis. And in this case, you have these 2 views which are joined together. They actually share the same x-axis, where you have different y-axis. In this case, is to have separate axes, so they don't have to be the same at all. and you can imagine, so there will be also called horizontal concatenate, which allows you to join the visualizations horizontally, which is very similar to the one we saw before. And finally is something called the repeat. So the repeat is just a simplification of they call the concatenate. In the sense, in the concatenate, we have to specify each individual visualizations repeat and separately. But in some cases, when the visualizations you want to join together or concatenate together are very similar, for example, the only difference will be the change of the x-axis, which attribute that's mapped to, and everything else, it is the same. Then you can use repeat, which will make it much faster or write less code when you need to create this. Okay, and let's have a look at the example. And so this was the examples from last week. We are using the weather data set, and then we make the mark as bar. So we end up with a bar chart. In terms of encoding, we say for the x-axis, we're going to be using the date attributes from the data set, and the type will be ordinal. And then the y-axis, we're going to be using aggregation, because this time we don't want to just use display the raw data, and the aggregation we use is mean. The particular field we're going to use is called precipitation. That just basically means rainfall, and the type is quantitative. So these are all things we already covered. Okay, and in this particular case, you can actually specify the time unit as months. So that's why it shows January, February, March here. And okay, then similarly, the y-axis we already mentioned, we're using aggregate, which calculating the mean of the precipitation, which is the amount of rainfall. Okay, so now we're going to first cover is the layering. So what layering does is they kind of putting different views on top of each other, and it will try to do it in kind of a smarter way, so you can still see all the views. And usually, for example, what you don't want to do is you don't want to say put two bar charts and one on top of another, then one will be blocking the other. But for example, if you have one bar chart and one line chart, or maybe two line charts, and the layering would work quite well. You can have a line chart with multiple lines, and you still can see each of them quite clearly. Okay, so the things you need to do is to add something called layer, and then its value will be this angle, sorry, the square bracket. If you remember, that means an array. And inside this array, and you would have the definitions of each layer. In the sense, you can have define one view using this, which is a bar chart, and you can define another one, a different view. In this case, the mark it says is rule, which is this line, and the encoding, it only has a y value, it doesn't have x value, and it's using the mean of the precipitation, and the type is quantitative. So all that says is I draw a line which shows, excuse me, shows the average of rainfall over the year, and just draw it on top. So make it easier to compare in terms of the rainfall. So this month is above average, and these are the months which below average. Okay, and we're going to do that in the online editor just to show you how that works. Let me get it. Ooh. Oh, I have to exit. Okay, I'm gonna start my online editor now. Vega-Lite. No, I'm not sure if this is the right one. Let me just try again. Oh, okay, so it is the correct one. looks slightly different. Okay, we have this schema. So the first thing is we need to create the first visualization, which essentially the data from the rainfall. We're going to just do the same as we had before. So we say data. Oh, I remember you have to use double quote everywhere. In this case, we're going to use in URL. This has to be double quoted again. And the particular files will be in data slash. Oh, I need to check again. So this is the Vega dataset. Oops. So the GitHub, yeah, slash Vega dataset. So in this particular case, we're going to using weather. Okay, so we have two choices, either using Seattle weather.csv file. Okay, or the other one is just called the weather.csv file. Okay, and I think they are quite similar. So I'm going to just use the weather.csv file, which is slightly easier to type. Okay, and just try to explain again. So you can only access these data sets if you're using the online editor. And then you need to go to this particular website. So it's all under Vega. And it has a repository called the Vega dataset. And you can use any of the data which is under the data directory. So that's why we have date slash first. That tells it it's under the data directory. And then just pick any names. So in this case, I used weather.csv. So that's this file we're going to be using. Or we could use exactly the same as they say. Oops. Okay, so it also has Seattle weather, which is a CSV file. Okay, and then once we done the data, then we can add the actual visualization. So we want to set the mark. In this case, we're going to be a bar. And then we'll do the encoding. And inside encoding, we have the X. And then I'll set the Y as well. So I'm going to put in these bracket first before actually typing the code. So for the X, we want that to be, okay, let's say just field. I'm gonna call it date. Yeah, it's date. It doesn't recognize. Okay, and then so maybe without the type, it's still gonna even work. Okay, and this field will be called precipitation. Okay, and you can see now, and it's already tried to automatically generate some visualization for me. And in this case, and the visualization is very wide. It's a bit weird. It's not even showing the values in order, the Y precipitation. So I want to make sure I set the type as quantitative. Okay, so that's a bit better. And what it's showing now is, so it's like, say, the precipitation for every single day of the data. Obviously, that's a bit too much. And so I want to aggregate them. And in this case, we're going to use min. It doesn't like it. Unexpect this in line 10.
Sorry, there are two double quotes. Maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah, thank you. But I don't think that particularly solved anything still. I'm still listing the values for each day. So we do really need to say time unit here as months. It does that again. Okay, that's a bit better. So now we had visualizations which shows the average for each month, because we had this time unit here, so it knows how to show the months. And the difference is it does not show each month individually, and because it thinks there's not enough space, so every next month it shows here. I'm just going to try if I put in the type. Would that make any difference? Ordinal. Okay. Oh, sorry. So after I put in the type ordinal, it decided, okay, I'm going to put the labels for each month now. Okay. Okay, so this is something we have covered last week, and you would have known already. Now we're going to try the next part, is to add an extra layer onto this. So as we're seeing here, so you need to say layer, and using this square bracket to mark the number of layers, so you can have more than 2. So obviously in this examples, we're only doing 2. And so this will be after the data, so we'll still get the same data, but now I'm adding layer, and its value would be angle bracket and here. So okay, so what does is now creating one layer. Okay, so what I'm missing here is each layer itself has to be inside a object. Sorry, itself has to be a let me just do the indentation now. Format document Shift Alt F. Yeah, but why it didn't work? Okay, so nope. Okay. Once you create the first layer, now you can add other layers to it. And so you just have to make sure, okay, so this is my first layer. It starts from here and ends here. And you can actually click this one. You can see this little downward arrow, which allows you to folder the code And just to make it easier to see, okay, that's my first layer. I'm going to create my second layer. Say, I need a comma. And in my second layer, it's very simple. The mark will be rule. So basically means like a ruler. And then encoding will be only y-axis. Okay, like that. Okay, just say agree. Okay. Aggregate will be min. Ooh. And the field would be precipitation. Sorry, that's correct. It's just an error. And then type will be quantitative. Yay! Okay, and you can see now we have a second one there. And so obviously here we didn't change the color, so it's still black, which is the default color. But it's a little bit different, which makes it look slightly different. We can change the line color to red if we want. And then you can, so this is just maybe one of the first ones, one of the first layers. And you can do exactly the same thing and add more layers. Maybe let's say mark, let's do point. And then encoding. So in this case, we still need X. And then its field would be let me see, what are the fields we can use? Let's say maximum temperature. So that we'll call it temp underscore my. And the type would be quantitative. Oh, sorry, the X has to be, sorry, the X-axis will still be the date. And then the time unit will still be months, just to make it consistent with the other ones. Okay. So you can see, and it's actually adding some, sorry, and this one should be, I think it's ordinal. Yeah. Okay, so you can see these ones now, but we haven't any using any actual data yet because it's only showing the date. And then you say for my Y, I want to use the field. In this case, it's going to be, this is going to be the maximum temperature. And then the type will be quantitative. Or you can already see it's starting to do something like this. So it's showing the temperature, maximum temperature over the year, or laid on top of what they already have. And we may want to aggregate as well, just to see, say, aggregate, and still using mean or average. Do we have average or? Sorry. Okay. So you can see now we have 3 layers. The first layer is the temperature. sorry, the average precipitation, which are the bar chart. And the second one is average precipitation. And finally, this is the average temperature of the month. And obviously, the last one skew the y-axis a little bit. And so you can see the precipitation becomes very small. If I take this out, which is the last part, I have to delete this one. Oh, it does not recognize the comment. It has to. Okay, so just basically you can add as many as layers as you want. These all stack on top one of each other. So that's layering.
I have a
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
What we are trying to achieve by doing this layering?
Oh, so that's just, for example,
yeah.
And I think maybe the one of the typical thing you want to do is, for example, if you want to have a chart with multiple lines, and okay, for example, let me just do 2 lines, and there's no easy way. I mean, if you want to compare, so that's probably will be the easiest way to do that within layers. So you need to, you have to specify each line separately and then put them together. So you can have multiple lines in the same chart, for example.
Okay.
Yeah. And sometimes it's, for example, as the one we showed in the lecture, you can have a line chart. You want to add some extra information to a chart, then you use layering, add on top, for example, just add extra line.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, yeah, a more complex one, something you want them to display in the same chart rather than saying next to each other, then use layering.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, will that not create a little bit of confusion instead of them being separately displayed in different visualizations? I'm just asking.
Yeah, again, depends. So for example, in this case, it shows the average of rain or precipitation over the years. So I think this is better than, say, put the red line in a separate chart. Then you can directly compare whether it's above or below the red line here.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah. And I guess similar, say, in this example, if you have 2 lines, it's probably easier to compare when they are in the same chart.
Sure.
Yeah, but there's cases where you have 2 separate charts will work better. For example, you have 2 bar charts. Let me just change this to bar. And so for example, if I have 2 bar chart now, it's not very useful because the second bar chart completely block the first one. So it's just basically not good to do it this way. Can I just do color? Right. Okay. The color. I want to change the color, but obviously that's not how you do it.
Okay, never mind. Thank you. I got what we are using layering for. Thank you.
Okay, let's back to the slides now. So the next thing we're going to cover is called Concat, which is short for concatenation. So it's different from layering. This is when the visualization itself are put next to each other, not in terms on top of each other. Okay, so we still start with the same visualizations, which shows the weather, the average rainfall over the months, over the year. So this is exactly the same as before. And when you need to do concatenate, you could just create 2 views, some similar to this. So this is the first view where it uses the precipitation to show the value. Okay, and the second one, which shows the temperature. Okay, that's the only difference. And then when you need to concatenate them into one view, you just put V concat, that means vertical concatenation, and use a comma and then square bracket. It's very similar to the syntax as layering, just saying instead of layering, you say V concat. And then these two will be put into one view instead of two separate views. Even the data displaying is different. Okay. So this can be quite easily demonstrated if I, okay, have to exit again. So actually here we can potentially do three of these. So instead of layer, now you say v concat. Yeah. And obviously then you have these three separate views. They're just vertically concatenated. You can say, I think it's just H concat, which is horizontal concatenation. So you'll put like this. And obviously overlays the middle one, and it only has Y values, so it doesn't look very nice. But if we go back to and give it a little bit X as well on this side, which is just make it the same as the other. Okay. Let's say yeah. Okay. Anyway, and so the main point is, so instead of layer, you just say v concat, and again still use the same angle bracket here and here. So that gives you the, how do I say, an array of these objects. And each of these objects is a specification for one of the validations. It becomes the element of this array. And again, you can have multiple ones, as many as you want, really. And then for each one, you just need to specify, as you would do otherwise, to specify a single validation. And the difference is these will be displayed separately. And so the V concat give you vertical stacked validations. And if you change this to H concat, which give you horizontally stacked validations. Okay. So that's concatenation. Okay, and then we have another one, which is kind of like the simplified version of the V concatenation or the concatenation. In the sense, if you look at previous one, this part or these two layers, they are very similar, with the only difference is the field. So here, it says field is precipitation. The other one says field is temperature. So the repeat allows you to simplify this. So for every part that is the same, you only need to specify once, and just only to specify which field will be changing, or which one will be changing. In this case, will be field. Okay, and so this is a single bar chart validation specification. Okay, and then this is how you do repeat. And you define repeat, and then it says which one you want to. You want to repeat the rows, and this will be precipitation, temperature, and wind. So this is the first row, second row, and third row. So this will show be the precipitation, this will show temperature, and this will be wind. And then you need to use the spec, and then shows the actual specified actual validation, and it says this is where you specify the repeat, and you have to say here the particular field you want to change between the views. It's just say repeat and the row, and so the row is what's defined here, and then that will give you these ones. So the first one will be the precipitation, The second one will be temperature, and the last one will be wind. Yeah, and so we can, so basically only need to specify the validation now only once, and then you can repeat many times, depends on how many elements you have here. So I'm going to show you in the actual editor. Okay, and so now first you need to repeat and row, and you have to put everything else inside called spec now. So I need something called repeat. I will repeat. Inside the repeat, I have something called row, which itself is an array. Ooh, the array is always square bracket, and it contains precipitation. Okay, and I can do temperature. In our case, will be temp max or temp minimum, something similar. And finally, wind. Let's see, do we have wind? Yes, we also have wind here as well. So we're going to just do wind as well. And you can imagine you can easily add more if you want to repeat. Okay, and then we have this part, which is specification. Now it has to be put into the spec property, which was removed before. So you need a spec. And then everything here will be in the spec. Okay, so it's already working now. And so what you can see, it's a bit beyond what we already hoped to achieve. All we hope achieved is I want to show stray validations, but what actually happened is inside the repeat, we have a horizontal concatenation or H concat, and then each concat has 3 views. So that's why we have so many views here. So basically this got repeated 3 times. But here, currently it's still not using the different values. It's all using the precipitation. Yeah? So we can update this one. So we still try to create what is in here. So we only create one view, but repeat 3 times within different. So we need to basically delete these 2. So this is the last one, which is the line chart. So we don't need that anymore. And this part is a single line, or this case is not a single line, the average for each year. Don't need that either. Okay, and then we're left with a single one. Okay, and in this case, we don't need to concatenate anymore. So we only just leave the single validation. And again, now we don't need to put this inside a curly bracket. Now you can see, let me see if I can get this one to format properly. Okay. Okay, and now you can see, we can see it's repeating 3 times still, but haven't quite used the one we needed, changing the y-axis values. So we just need to change the y in terms of precipitation. This has to go to repeat and row.
Kyle, are we allowed to copy the syntax into the IDE? So like when you have repeats now on the slide deck, can we copy the syntax onto the IDE and start
Yes, I mean,
changing that?
If you want to copy the code as a start point for your validation, that's fine.
Yeah, okay.
and you have to make sure it actually works. And because the direct copy from the slides might not always work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let me see why the precipitation is not working. I misspelled it, so that's what is why it's not working. Okay. And so now we have this validation and shows the basically a bar chart. Repeat 3 times because we have this line here. And so that's using the precipitation, temperature minimum, sorry, temperature max or and the wind. And obviously I can imagine if I can easily add more if I want, and temp, I think it's minimum as well. And you can see now we have more validations. So this is the maximum and this is minimum temperature. And the shape looks very similar, but the values change. And also if you want to make any changes to the 3 validations, you just need to change here. For example, if I want to change all these 3 into line chart, and you just have line and all 3 change to line. And because you are using the repeat, it's not possible to say I want this one is line and the other one is bar chart and this one is a scatter plot. In that case, you have to use the concatenate to specify and each of these differently. Yeah. Or maybe you can even define a different repeat. For example, here, say here it defines the row, repeat as row. Let me see if I could, for example, now I can define something else called chart, and oh, maybe just called mark. Let's do a bar and a line and a point. Okay, and let's see. Oh, sorry. If this would work. So instead of just saying line, I can say, and using a very similar syntax here as this line here. So I'll just say repeat. But instead of gonna do marker. Oops. No. Oh, should I have to call it mark? No. Okay. Cannot read property field of undefined. Okay, so this one doesn't work. So you can do this with a row, but if you want to do this with a mark, it doesn't seem to be working. So this doesn't work. Repeat. Oh, I must have deleted something else, which causing the error. And says invalid specification. Ah, I deleted the. I deleted the entire mark. I need to at least have one mark. Okay, yeah. So I was trying to use the same repeat syntax for the mark. It seems that doesn't work. Maybe there's some way, but it works differently. Okay, let's get back to here. So that's repeat. Okay, and you can actually do more complex things. And so if you remember, and this is actually something we mentioned before, which is called scatter plot matrix. So it's like a matrix of scatter plots. Each element of the matrix is actually itself a scatter plot. So what you need to do is you just need to do 2 repeats. So one for the row, which as we did, and the other one for the column. And then it will generate stray by stray for you, this one here. Okay, this is actually should be quite easy, quick to do. So if I go back to the, and so we already had the repeat, already have the row. Now we just need to add a column, and then the columns will have the same specification as the, so we could just copy and paste this. Okay, it's using a different one there. Let's see, column. Okay, and you can see it's now already start trying to repeat. But here it's changing the y-axis because it's using repeat. The x-axis is not repeat yet. So to do that, and here the field we need to change as well. And obviously, the other thing we want to change is now, in terms of specs, we now want point, because we want a scat plot. And then the field will be, now the field will be a repeat. And its value will be column. And obviously we don't have this. And we don't have this either. Temperature. Maybe I need to add the type here. Quantitative. Oops. Okay, now we have it. And so obviously you have to, here is the Vega-Lite is not as smart in terms of guessing the data types. So you really have to tell it which data type it is. Now I think we have it working. So we have the wind, temperature, and precipitation on the x-axis. And similarly, wind, temperature, and precipitation on the x-axis. And you have these correlations. And obviously, these are always straight line because that's the precipitation with itself, and same as the temperature and wind. And then you can see the correlation of the every other pair of possible attributes. That's why it changed the orders in the one of the axes. Okay, it takes slightly a little bit time. Yeah, so that maybe this one looks even better. So now you have the same order in terms of attributes: wind, temperature, precipitation, wind, temperature, precipitation. And obviously, if you have more attributes, you can build even larger matrix quite easily. Okay, and back to the slide. Okay, and so that's how you. Okay, and finally, you can create dashboard, use all these tools we discussed so far. So the layering, the concatenation, and repeat. Yeah. So for example, for this one, if you want to create a dashboard, something like this, so you first create these views and this one, this one, this one, and then you put them together. And each of these views might require composition by himself as well. So this will be a, it's not the concatenation, I forgot the word for that now, the facet. Okay, so these will be your base graphs. And then first you use a facet to change from this into a kind of multiple view. And then for this one, you use repeat to create this matrix, which we already did before. And for this one, for each of these single ones, you need create a layered validation with the bar chart and the average, and then join them together. Okay, so once you had this, you repeat it 3 times vertically to show the 3 different attributes. Like say, I can't really see, but I think it's the precipitation, temperature, and wind, something like this. That gives you this part. And then you can combine these 2 together, which is this one and this one, using horizontal concatenate. So they put them next to each other horizontally. And finally, you put this one and the entire top part together using vertical concatenate, in the sense so one is put on top of the other. Yeah, and so this is getting quite complex, but you can build even more complex dashboard and using the same methodology. So you start with building the basic validations and then start to join them, for example, first with a layer, then repeat, and then different repeats can join them together and always join even more. Okay. Okay. So that's just basically using these similar things we covered in terms of the facet, which is the first one, and then the layer, the repeat, and then finally the concatenate. You can compose very complex dashboard. Okay, and so that's all we're going to talk about in terms of composing views from simpler views. And next we're going to talk about interaction, so mostly just with selection. So, and the selections require 3 components. So the first is the event processing. And so how does interaction occur? In terms of events here, it could be, say, mouse over, could be a mouse click, or maybe a drag of the mouse, any of these, or even a key press, that's the event. And the next part will be the points of interest. So that may be which data items in your validations will be changed or, for example, selected as a result of the event. And finally, the predicate function. So that means that's the one which is used to decide what data are going to be affected as a result of the visualization. Okay, we're going to see some examples later, and so we'll make it much easier to understand. And so in this example, we are using the car data. So that's the same data we used early at the very beginning of the term. This has different attributes of the cars. And then it's using circle. Okay, the circle, so then you can have the color. And then you have the encoding. You can say, okay, the field, one of the field is horsepower. It's using a shorter for queuing, so it's quantitative. And the other field is miles per gallon. So the Y is miles per gallon. And the color is using the field origin, and type is N. That's interesting. Nominal, I think N stands for nominal, and that's okay. Let's give this a try, and that's something we can do quite easily. I have to exit again. So let's just create a new one. We don't need this anymore. it still remembered what I did before. And how do I clear this out? Does this still remembers? Okay, I think probably there. And always I can just delete everything that's been already there. And so this is our last one. Okay, and before we add, we want to just check in terms of data sets. So it will be here. Do they have something called cars? Yeah, which is a JSON file. Okay, and which has these properties and we can use. And it has horsepower and miles per gallon, just so. Okay, so here we need to, so the first one will be data. And in this case will be a URL, and its value would be data/cars JSON. I forgot double quote here. Okay, and then comma. Let's say the mark will be circle, and then let's do the encoding. The X will be in terms of field will be horsepower. Horsepower. Okay, and then it's type is Q. Let's see if that already recognizes. Type is Q. Okay, not sure if that's recognized. And let's do the Y, and the field would be miles per. Let's check the data. Miles per gallon. So here you have to make sure the capital is always the same, and otherwise it will not recognize it. For example, here I tapped horsepower, and I think in the data it was, yeah, capital H. So it has to be capital H here as well. Okay. I missed a column here. Yeah, miles per gallon. And I need to do the type as well. Type Q. Yay, okay, so actually recognize Q. So you don't have to do quantitative anymore. And finally, you want to set the color as well. And the field will be called origin. Let's just double check. Yeah, origin. Field would be origin. Okay. This is recognized. Oh, okay. And so now we have the visualizations, and it shows the horsepower, the miles per gallon, which is in terms of fuel consumption. Finally, the color represents the country or the area, sorry, the continent where the car is made, is either in Europe, Japan, or USA. It's in 3 colors. The color is automatically picked for you. Okay. So we now can do some interaction. So this is a simple chart, which you should know how to do by now. And now we're going to see some interaction that we can do. Okay. So first, we can, to add a selection interaction, you just use select. Okay, and then you can set the color as well in terms of the depends on the condition. So you can say selection when picked, the type of the selection or called single because we only want to pick one circle at a time. And you say condition when selection is not picked, a value would be gray. So what this does, it changes everything to gray and only has a color when the node is selected. Okay, and let's have a look. So first we need to add this part. So in this mark circle, and you do selection, and you say when it's picked, okay, it's not recognized, and let the type be single. So every time you only select one node, currently nothing gonna change yet because you haven't say what will happen after the select. So this will come here in the color. So you say the condition. So when selection happens, when it's not picked, okay, and its value that's a bit different. Value would be gray. Okay, so instead of default, it give it color blue, but blue is still one of the colors we use, so we don't want to use that. Now, if I click any of these nodes, it's a bit small. Let's see if we can make it a bit bigger. Is there something you can do? Okay, I just have to zoom in, I guess. And if you select something, that's still a bit harder to see. And you can see different nodes I picked, they would have color, so basically when it's picked, it was just using this specification and matching the color to the field of origin. And when it's not picked, the default ones will just be the gray colors we set here. Okay, that's how you do selection. Okay, now and the previous one, and it says you're only allowed to do a single selection at a time. And in this one, you can do multiple selections. And by change this to type to multi. And you can also say on when it's mouse over. So that means you don't have to click and it will just mouse over, then it will select it. Okay, let's have a quick look. So first, you can change just the type here to multi, and then you can select the multiple nodes. Oh, I have to hold my control key. No. Shift key. Okay, it has to be my shift key. And I have to holding down the shift key on my keyboard, then I can select multiples. And I can also say I want on to be mouse over. So what it says is I want to just mouse over and it will become shift key. Okay. Again, so I still have to hold down this shift key, but now I don't have to click. And I just have to move my mouse and it will color everything. My mouse is over and actually deselect it if it's already colored. Okay. So these are different variations in terms of selection. So single point, multiple point, or just even using mouse over. Okay, so we come back to these three. So we talked about the events. So as we see, could be click, could be mouse over, and the point of interest. Which one usually currently is the point that you select. And finally, the predicate function. Currently, you only selected the one, which is you clicked on, but actually it can be more complex than that. Okay, and so in this example, we're gonna say select it. If you select a point, which is a car, and you want to use its field to select all the other cars with the same number of cylinders. So if you remember from the data set, each car has maybe 3, 4, 6, or 8 cylinders. Okay. In this case now, when I select a car, I would want to select all the cars with similar number of cylinders. And all you need to do is just say field cylinder. So that's what the predicate means. That's the criteria. So just not only to select that single point, I want to select everything with the similar number of cylinders. So that's what you're seeing here. When you click on the car, all the other cars with the same number of cylinder get displayed. Okay, so that's a little, let's try this one first. And you can also add a slide at the bottom as well, but let's just say to do this first. We going to now, I'm still do single in the sense I'm going to select one thing at a time. And what I'm going to bind now, pick the type is single and fields. I'm going to select the fields, which is had to be capital, I think, cylinder. Oh, sorry. Let's have a look. What is called? Yeah, cylinders. Okay, have to have S at the end as well. So cylinders. Okay, now if I select one car, you can see all the other cars with the same number of cylinder get selected. If I click this one, okay, so these are all the other cars with the same number of cylinders, and these are the final ones. So these are these are all mostly American cars because it's red. These has very large horsepower and very low miles per gallon. And these are probably the lower horsepower ones. And it has a mix of different locations. Maybe the most are from Japan. That's probably the 4-cylinder, and this is the middle one. Okay, and obviously you can try different fields. So instead of linking cylinder, we can also potentially. That's a bit difficult. Okay, but for example, you can potentially say select, for example, by origin, then everything with the same origin will show up. Let's say origin. Okay, And then if I select this car, okay, that's Japan car, and everything from Japan is got selected. And if I click this one, it shows red, and this everything from USA is got selected. So suddenly got many more than the Japanese cars. And finally, these are the European cars. Yeah. So here the predict decides what gets selected, and you can choose. And so I didn't choose, say, the other attributes such as name, or maybe and horsepower, because then the number of similar cars might be very small. You might not be able to see it. Other cars get selected. And okay, wow, I run a bit behind. So if we didn't get to finish today, we're going to complete and try to finish it and in the next lecture. Okay, so what you can also do is you can create a slider like this by using bind, and then you set up the range, which is the minimum and maximum value you would have on there. And then you can use that, allow you to select the values in the visualization. Okay, and you say, I'm going to bind the first input range, this one, to the cylinders. So that here it says the input type will be range. So that gives you the slider, and this sets the minimum value. So this minimum value will be 3, which is 1 here. This will be the year. Okay. I'm gonna just do this quickly so we can have a look. We'll probably maybe just do cylinders so we can see the years of cylinders. So I'm gonna go back to our editor. Now again, still under our picked. So we set the type, we set the fields. Now we're gonna create a one, which allows you to select, and this is a bind. So this is a binding something to something else. Yeah. So something you can do here, which would be bind to some properties here. So I'm gonna say I'm gonna bind cylinders to a input, which is a range. Okay, there's other possible selection options besides the range. A range gives you a slider, and the minimum value would be 3. Ooh. Oh, it doesn't show up. Let me see if anything I didn't get right. Input is cylinders. Pick the origin. Type, field. Ah, sorry. I see. It's just here. So if you're gonna use it, you have to set the same value here. Okay, so now it says cylinders, and it's a range. The minimum value is 3. So that's 3 cylinders. Assume I can set the maximum as well if I want. Maximum to 12. Oh, okay. And so it's still a little bit silly in the sense it will still try to find 3.3, cylinder 3.3. And then you can see, okay, these are all the 4-cylinder cars. Obviously, we don't have 4.6 cylinder cars or 5, but we do have lots of 6 and 8. Maybe even some 10-cylinder cars. No. 12? No. So the maximum is actually just 8 in our data set. Okay. I'm not going to do the year just because of time, and also it's exactly the same. So if you want to add year as one of the bindings, you have to make sure you select it here as well, which I missed in the first time. Okay, and then you can also do a different type of selection. In this case, you're not selecting a single point anymore. You're selecting an area by dragging. And then the type here will be grid. Sorry, and the selection will be called grid, and type will be interval. I assume I could do it quite easily with this one. So currently it's called unpicked, which give me this. Now we're going to do something a bit different. So I'm going to take out all the picked, and instead I'm going to using grid, and then do the type as interval. Why it doesn't like it? Cannot find the selection means picked. Ah, okay, of course. Yeah, and so that's because here I'm still using picked. So I have to say not grid, because I'm using grid here. I say not grid, and then here's gray. And hopefully I can do, now I can drag the shade and then I can move around. Right? So all you need to do is now say selection will be grid and type of interval. Interval basically means you can drag the box around. Actually, I don't know how to, oh, I just click again and deselect it. Okay, and so this is kind of even more complex ones. Now, previously we do the interval, and when you do the interval, it selects on both x and y axis because you draw a rectangle. And you can even say, no, you can further customize that. Say, I want now only select on my x axis. So this is what you do when you type, say, encoding into x. And as you're seeing here, now the selection will be only on the x, not on the y. Doesn't matter how you move the mouse cursor up and down, that does not affect. Only the x direction will be useful. And you can also bind this into scales. And when you bind that into scales, so you're not moving the visualization anymore, you are moving the scales. Okay, so which can be a little bit weird, but sometimes it's actually a useful thing to do. So I'm gonna again demonstrate. So this will be easy, and instead of selection, I only do the selection not currently, for example, as this anymore. If I do the change here, I say, oh, sorry, this has to be inside the grid. So still say type is interval, but now I want to do the encodings as x. So that means the selections were on the x-axis only, not the y. So you can see the selection now is on the x-axis, and you can change, and you can then move, yeah. And if I do this one, bind that to the scales, that means I no longer bind to the x-axis of my data points, but instead will be the x-axis of my axis. The default value will be the data. And if I say bind and scales, now if I do a move, or I can't even select now, now can only do is just do the selection, but I can zoom in and zoom out and move it around. So let's give you different type of interaction. Okay. Okay. And so now probably this will be the last part before we go on finish today. And so the last part is, as you can see now, and all the things we have done so far is just in one view, but actually it's possible to do selection in one view and then affect the selections in other views. Okay, so first, this is a simple using the repeat, if you remember. So we do the same scatter plot, but has a pairwise difference between the displacement and so this is miles per gallon displacement. The other side is horsepower and miles per gallon. So you can see the ratio between these. Okay, let me see if I can do this quickly before time runs out. Okay, and we need data, and then we need a repeat. And inside repeat, we say repeat row, and which will be, this has to be, how do I say, square bracket, because which is an array, and miles per gallon. Okay, and then I also want to repeat on my column, and another array which are the horsepower and miles per gallon. Okay, and then because now we use the repeat here, we have to not here we have to use spec. I just need one bracket. This first have to have a comma, spec, and all the way to the very end. Okay. Well, at least now we got to the a matrix, but we haven't quite used this row and the column yet, the repeat. And you can see now it's still the same, just repeated 4 times. So all these 4 are exactly the same. So we want to do X in terms of field, and this would be called repeat. This will be row, and then Y field. You can see now the X now is miles per gallon. And the Y field, you will just say repeat. Oops. Okay. Keep pressing the wrong key. Repeat and column. Okay. Now we are getting there. Okay. So now you can see we create a repeat. On the x-axis is still miles per gallon. Should be horsepower and miles per gallon. Okay, so obviously this is actually is. So this is, that's interesting. So even here displays miles per gallon, and this is horsepower, and this is again horsepower, but actually the visualization itself is different. You can see if this is actually both horsepower, and these points will be different. the visualization of this chart and this scat plot should be exactly the same. Okay. There must be some bugs in my code. And given that we are running out of time, we are almost at 3 o'clock now. So I will stop there and I will continue from here in next week. And next week, we can also introduce the next coursework, which will be due when we come back in the next term, which is next year. So that will be what we're covering next week. Okay, we'll stop here now.